but it's fine.
Hi, everyone.
Can
you hear me?
Okay, all right, good.
It's on now. All right, I am so honored to be here this evening interviewing Roxane Gay. And I wanted to start by asking you, we live in a world where people place labels on us, whether we want them to or not. If someone asks, who are you? How do you self-describe yourself?
I generally lead with my name, and it just depends on the day, but I generally identify as either a Black American or a Black woman or a Haitian American woman.
I love it. So your book, Bad Feminist, which I thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated, is hard to believe, for me at least, 10 years old this year.
It is.
And I'm wondering, what do you think the state of feminism is now versus 10 years ago when that book was published?
The state of feminism is probably the same as it has always been, in flux. You know, we're always making advances and we're always losing ground because people in power rarely want to cede it. And people rarely want to treat women like people. So have we made advances over the past decade? Yes, but as anyone with a uterus can tell you, we've lost critical ground. And who knows where it will end, because now they're going after things like IVF and birth control. And that is exactly what Margaret Atwood foretold. And every time women have said, The Handmaid's Tale is a cautionary tale, people have said, oh, you're overreacting. But we're not. And so things are challenging.
I was going to ask you where you think things are headed over the next 10 years, but it's that same cycle you're talking about of progress and backlash is what you're saying, right?
Well, it depends on what happens in November, honestly. If Biden is elected, then things will proceed. And I do think we will roll back all of the lost ground that we've seen over the past 8 years. If Trump wins, I would encourage everyone to leave. I mean, I jest, but I also don't. You know, if Donald Trump wins, it will probably be the last election as we know it. He told us already what he's going to do. The Republicans are really good at telling us exactly what they're going to do and then executing with precision and discipline. And the Democrats need to get on that page and get on that level and start having some plans other than go vote. Like anyone you're going to say that to is already going to go fucking vote. So we need more robust plans, and we also have to have hard conversations about why do we keep supporting a gerontocracy, and why are the two candidates running for president over 75? That makes no sense. Like, why are we listening to men, first of all, but why are we listening to men who can't get pregnant? I'm like, I don't really want to hear either of their thoughts on abortion. So we have to really make some difficult changes in this country, and we have to start listening to the kinds of people who are saying that they're going to sit out this election in November. We have to take them seriously because they have ample reason to sit out this election. I think it's a mistake, but I also understand perfectly why many people are saying that that's the choice they're going to make. I think that they've been backed into a corner, politically speaking, and nobody likes that. And sometimes the only way to be heard is through silence.
You saying this is just reminding me of this scholar who studies, who conducts these surveys, Jennifer Lawless, and asks women in the professions that are most likely to lead to political office, whether they'd consider running for office. And I think what's so fascinating is that over the past 20 years, there's actually been a slight dip in the United States in the percentage of these women with the requisite or the common background saying that they would consider running for office. I wonder why you think that is.
Why would you? It's a really terrible job. It frankly doesn't pay that well. The benefits are good, but temporary. And Congress, you have to run every 2 years. So you're always running. When are you going to do legislating? Like, we really do need to overhaul the whole thing. But running for office is a grim prospect. And of course, at the local level, I do think that there is a lot of value to running for office, but it's a very expensive endeavor. It's very time consuming, and it can be very traumatizing, especially when you are marginalized in some way, because that tends to be the first thing that is attacked. Not your policies, not your ideas, not your credentials, but your looks or your gender, your race, your religion. And why would you subject yourself to that? Especially knowing in certain states that it won't matter. Any states that have like super majorities where you know that all of the effort in the world isn't going to create any change. I think a lot of people who would ordinarily run for office are trying to figure out what are some other ways that I can serve my community.
Does this mean you're not throwing your hat in the ring?
The day I run for office, you just know that something's wrong. Like, time's up. Never, ever in life would I run for office.
All right, well, I'm sorry we can't break some news here this evening.
Yeah, no. No, 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 sorry. I get asked all the time, and like, what makes you think I would run for office? No, no. Also, the Congress building is dirty. I don't know how many of you have been to Congress, but it's disgusting in there. It's like rat infested and water stains. It's a really old building. And when you're a new congressperson, you get the crappy office.
This is an audience of women. Aren't we supposed to be encouraging them to run?
I mean, go ahead. Like, it depends on your tolerance for gross environments and misogynistic, racist people. I've just reached my limit at my big age. I'm 49, I'm gonna be 50, so I'm good.
So switching topics, in your memoir, Hunger, you write about growing up in upper middle class communities in the United States. And I happen to be a mom who's currently raising daughters and privileged to be raising daughters in a community that I imagine to be very similar to the ones that you grew up in. And one thing that has been hugely on my mind right now is my fear of the entitlement that is cultivated in some, certainly not all, boys in these environments. There's one episode last Mother's Day, I remember it vividly, where I woke up in the middle of the night at 12:30 in the morning, and in my state of half consciousness, I thought someone was breaking into my home. As it turns out, one of the boys in the neighborhood goes to a very elite prep school, actually a school my husband and I have considered sending our own daughters to when they're older. And he was having a party. And some young men decided to go around waking up the neighbors, going to our front doors, banging, ringing bells, et cetera, which absolutely terrified my daughters, of course. And, I'm watching the security camera footage of this event, and these boys were white. One of them wasn't wearing a shirt or shoes, seems to have come from a pool. And I remember saying to my husband, if these had been poor Black men, they would have been arrested. It would have been assumed that they were breaking into our house. And if girls in our community were running around at 12:30 in the morning, topless, without shoes, waking up all the neighbors, they would have been transported to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation. But of course, nothing of the sort happened. And what spooked me about watching this video was the sense of entitlement it felt like these boys had. And I remember saying to my husband in that moment, we can't send our girls to this prep school because I'm worried that if we do, and they go to parties with boys like this, that they will be raped. And all of this came flooding back as I was rereading your memoir in preparation for our conversation, because I wanted to ask you about this sense of entitlement, whether you think it's being cultivated in particular in more affluent communities in the United States, what the effects are, and what we can do about it.
Well, anyone can be entitled, but if you are wealthy, if you are a man, if you are extremely privileged in one way or another, you are far more likely to be entitled. And that's because the world has already told you that you should be able to have whatever you want. So why wouldn't you be entitled when you have no reason to believe otherwise? And that's a problem. You know, we often talk about, oh, the youth are so entitled. And it's like, they learned it from watching you. You know, it doesn't come from nowhere. And so it's definitely a concern. And you have to wonder what's going on in certain communities that not only look the other way and when young people, for example, do what these boys did in your neighborhood, but then dismiss it and act like, oh, it's no big deal, boys being boys. I'm like, well, boys being boys has led to a great many calamities, wars, and other horrifying things. So it's really important to push back and to call it out when we see it and point out why this is a problem. You shouldn't, I think people should have fun. I think young people should be young people. If you want to run around your neighborhood shirtless, please do. But if you ring my doorbell, you're not going to like what happens next. And, you know, I think that we have to just bring back shame and we do. And we have to bring back consequences, like fuck around and find out. I think if more people believed in that, fewer people would feel entitled because they would know what happens when you make that assumption about entitlement.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that socially stigmatizing anything, right? If you want to get kids to stop smoking cigarettes, whatever it is, the most effective thing to do is to socially stigmatize it.
And that's actually what worked in terms of getting all of us to quit smoking. I miss it so much. God, I miss it so much. I smoked for 18 years and I quit when I was 33. And I know that it was the right thing to do for every reason possible, but I sure miss it. But one of the many things that helped me get to that place was all of those really horrifying commercials of like the blackened lungs. And I was just like, I can't, that can't be me. Or the woman with the, yes. And she's, and it's like so powerful because it's a real person. So you know it's not just this theory that there are consequences to certain things. It was that here are visible examples of people who are suffering greatly because of something that, like us, they thought was a harmless habit. And when we put that kind of evidence in front of people, it does help. That's also how we started to reduce drunk driving. And Mothers Against Drunk Driving deserves all the credit in the world because they put together some truly powerful campaigns. This is your brain on drugs with the frying pan and the egg. Like these very memorable things have helped to reduce certain behaviors because people do learn by example. If you put it in front of people over and over again, enough people will realize this perhaps shouldn't be done. And social pressure, which is not a good thing, but it can be. Like there should be social pressure that you can't run around terrorizing your neighbors because you think it's funny. Like do that in your own backyard, wake your parents up and leave everyone else alone. So we'll see.
Thank you. Yeah, as a communication professor, I think that's so right. And then the other powerful thing that you're talking about is storytelling.
Yes.
And one of the things that I most admire about you is the way that you've shared your personal experiences, in particular in your memoir. I remember reading in Rebecca Solnit's book, she cited a statistic from the New England Journal of Medicine that being raped is 4 times more likely to result in a diagnosable case of PTSD than going to combat in war. But you read these statistics, and I think what ultimately moves people is the stories, is a story of a human being who you identify with. And that's why I so admire your memoir, Hunger. And so I guess my question for you is, you know, you've chosen to share personal stories that I think have certainly affected me, and I think audiences all over the world. And that's one of the big ways that we tackle these problems. How do you decide what parts of yourself you're willing to share publicly and what you decide to keep private?
Well, I have very firm boundaries. I'm actually a very private person. If you know something about me, it's that I've chosen for you to know that thing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really bad at boundaries, but with my writing, I'm good with boundaries. That's the one place where if I have a boundary, I'm going to stick to it. Because as someone who has been online for a great many years and has seen the advent of the internet now to like whatever it is, the internet really can be forever in ways that are uncomfortable. And so you really have to think carefully, like how much of yourself are you going to put online? Because you don't get to control ultimately who receives it. You might think, oh, this is cute and I'm sharing it with my 200 followers on whatever. But if someone takes a screenshot and decides to make a meme out of it and then sends it to 10 other people who send it to 100 other people and exponentially things start to spread, you want to make sure that that thing that they've taken from your life is something you're comfortable with them doing that to. And so that's how I decide what I will and won't put into the world through my writing. And that has been very helpful. And I'm also really glad that virality was not a thing when I was a teenager.
Interesting. So one of the things I write about in my new book is my worry that what's happening on social media is making the offline world more dangerous for women and girls. We were chatting earlier about my thinking that a lot of misogyny that exists online used to be more segregated to these darker corners of the web. Interested in what you think. But now things like jokes about violently abusing women are a mainstream part of youth culture on TikTok. And my concern is that it normalizes this way of thinking about women, treating women, committing acts of violence against women. And I'm wondering if you think that that's a trend.
I don't, but that's because I think it's always been here. And what the internet does, and what social media in particular does, is that it brings our attention to issues that have been longstanding. I don't think that we have ever lived in a time where women were not demeaned and degraded and treated poorly, and where people, mostly men, made jokes about violence to women, haha. It's just that we hear about it more now because the internet is a microphone. It amplifies these really toxic and misogynistic messages. And then we become aware of them. And then, you know, of course, it makes everything feel more dangerous because now we're aware of this thing. It's the same with racism. People are like, is it more racist now? No, they've always been there. They used to just keep their clan hoods in like the chest at the bottom of the bed. But online, they're like, yes, I get to be me. And they just let that freak flag fly. And unfortunately, the darker parts of the internet are where people who don't have the courage to be horrible in their day-to-day lives let it fester like a wound, but they keep digging at it and digging at it. And then they encourage other people. And what becomes dangerous about that is not that there's this cesspool of weak, scared men being racist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever. It's that you never know if one of them is going to then take those ideas and then go and kill a bunch of women in a sorority in Santa Barbara, like Elliot Rogers, or is going to then go talk to his buddies and march in Charlottesville, Virginia, and kill Heather Heyer. You just don't know. And that's what's so terrifying, because now they have an audience, and that audience is global. Whereas before it might be like 3 dudes in a basement. Mm-hmm. And so it is alarming. And I do think it's something we have to pay attention to, but I also think it's really important to recognize that it's not new. And the reason it's important to recognize that is so that we don't start to think that all of this bigotry, all of this ideation of violence toward women or other groups of people is new, that it's some sort of modern phenomenon. It isn't.
Sort of connected to that, one of the other things on my mind as a mother is that the CDC put out its youth risk behavior survey last year, which found a pretty significant increase in the percentage of teen girls who said that they had been forced to have sex in the United States between the years 2011 and 2021. Any thoughts on what might account for that phenomenon?
Well, again, I think it's that people are more comfortable talking about it now. It's just a different time, even from when I was a young person. it's a different time. And it's not that it's a free for all where everyone feels safe and comfortable disclosing that they've endured sexual violence. But I do think that we do live in in a culture that is a lot more open to hearing these stories and, more importantly, open to believing them. And I also think, yeah, I think it's just that we feel safer disclosing. I think the statistics aren't new. I think that it's probably a pretty flat line. And it's just now that people are talking about it.
I hope you're right.
Yep.
And sort of continuing with the theme of very disturbing developments, there have been these stories just over the past couple weeks about women who say that they were walking on the streets of New York City and have been like randomly punched. What do you make of that?
I mean, it's violence, and we hear about it again because of social media, but it's not, it's not a crime wave. And what I mean by that is there is a profound cause for concern, and we actually live in Lower Manhattan, so it's disturbing to say the least. I'm actually not worried about getting punched, but I am certainly worried for almost every woman I know. But this is what's so dangerous about social media. It's just offered without context. And so the algorithm also will serve this up to you. So you'll see like 7 videos in a row and you'll think, oh my God, every woman is getting punched in New York. But it's actually 7 videos out of like 10 million videos being made that day. And so without that context, it's very easy to assume that the city is an Armageddon and all hell has broken loose. And that's just, it's not. The city has never been safer. And it's really important to talk about that because there are a lot of people invested in the narrative that New York is some sort of really dangerous place and it's all gone to hell and crime, crime, crime. So we have to give the police, who have billions and billions of dollars in their budget, even more money to misuse. No. And so I do think it's important to talk about violence, but I also think it's important to talk about context because these narratives of violence, at the bottom of them is really just a desire for more policing and fascism. And it is a very slippery slope.
That's really interesting. Keeping with my pop culture theme for a moment, because I know you're an avid follower of it. What do you make of the way our society has been treating Kate Middleton?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people would like to make this into a poor Kate Middleton narrative. Kate Middleton is entitled to medical privacy just like anyone else is, but Kate Middleton is literally one of the most famous women in the world. She is the Princess of England. Her husband is heir to the throne. We don't care about that in this country because we divested ourselves of all of that by way of the Revolutionary War. But the reality is she is royalty, she is famous. And so when someone that famous who is visibly photographed every single day of their lives disappears for weeks on end, and they keep coming up with these cockamamie stories that make no sense and are easily debunked, people are inherently going, or just not inherently, they're going to naturally gravitate toward storytelling. They are going to try to fill the void that has been created by Kensington Palace with these narratives of, oh, she got a BBL, which I knew was not true. Or she's dead, which I think is closer to the truth. Or she's in a coma, or she was abused by William and he ruined her face and she can't be seen. I mean, these are wild conjectures, but they created the space for these conjectures by lying time and time again. And the British media gave Kate lots and lots of wide berth and privacy in a way that they have never done for Meghan Markle. And went so far as to blame Meghan Markle for the speculation on Kate, when Meghan is just doing her little website over there on the American Riviera, and just, she has her little babies and she has her little ginger, and like, they're just living their lives. So I do think that it's a shame that she may have cancer, even though that video was made by AI, which has also been debunked by a number of photo agencies. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's the truth. And so it's like, wow, even now, like something is still wrong. And I just think it's important to not act like she's the victim in this narrative. She's only a victim of the people who did not protect her. In the same way, they actually don't protect any of the women around Charles and William. They should have never put her in this position. They should have told the truth from the beginning and then said, we will not be discussing this for the next 6 months while she and her young children work on getting back to health and, of course, normalizing life for these kids. But no, they didn't do that. They protected William and threw her under the bus. And so let's put blame where it belongs.
Interesting. So what are you reading these days?
What am I reading? Oh, I'm actually reading a novel called Colored Television that will be out this summer by Denzi Senna. And so I just started it, but so far so good. And I just finished a really weird short story collection called Rejection by Tony Tulathamuti. He's a Thai-American writer, and he wrote a short story called The Feminist that appeared in N+1 maybe 2 years ago. That was very, very popular. And so that is also in this collection, and it's very good. And I'm reading this book by Emily Nagoski. She's a sex therapist. And I can't remember the title of the book, but it's really good. My wife recently interviewed her on her podcast. So the book was lying around and I was like, oh, let me take a gander.
I love it. So we also know that you're a big Beyonce fan.
I mean, yes.
And you write in Bad Feminist about the fact that sometimes we sort of can't help but sing along to pop culture songs and other media that don't always have the best feminist messages. And so I'm wondering, how do you grapple with that and how should we?
Well, you know, when I wrote Bad Feminist, one of the things that people took away was like, you can be human, you can be flawed, you can kind of do whatever you want, and you can still be a feminist. And that's sort of what I was saying. But really what I was saying is that we fall short of our ideals sometimes. And that doesn't mean that we should throw out all of the feminist energy and the feminist work that we have. But a lot of people then took it as a carte blanche for any old bullshit they wanted to do. Like, I'm a pro-life feminist. No, no, you are not. You're not. You can't be pro-life and a feminist. You can be like pro-life personally, but for everyone, like publicly, you are either pro-choice or you're not a feminist. So I really have been thinking in the decades since I first published the essays in that book, like, what does accountability look like? And how do we start to hold ourselves more accountable? Not because we shouldn't enjoy, for example, misogynistic music or whatever, but because as long as we keep embracing these messages, the people who make them have no reason to change them. There's no incentive to do better if we don't demand that they actually do better and give us better music, better film, better television. And so I'm just trying to figure out how we hold ourselves accountable while allowing ourselves to enjoy life, because life is really very hard. Would you like some water?
I would like some water, thank you. So yeah, how do we do that?
I don't know. Here you go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, for me, I'm starting to draw some harder lines in the sand over what I will and won't do with my time, money, and energy. And that's only because it has to start somewhere. And you also have to, if I'm going to put that kind of thinking into the world, I better be willing to live it as well. And so it's small things right now. Like, everyone's like, oh, what is your Spotify, whatever. Like, I'm not on Spotify because Joe Rogan. Like, that for me is the line in the sand. And it's very easy because Apple Music is right here, but Apple Music is Apple, and Apple uses slave labor to make our iPhones and our laptops and their stupid headsets. And I mean, the headset's great, but it's also dumb. And so it's, you know, there's just no ethical consumption in capitalism, but I am trying to make the better choices that I can, while also creating space not only for myself, but for others to be flawed.
I love that.
Beyonce's flawless, though. I mean, Cowboy Carter. Like, stop playing in her face. I believe that we should criticize everyone and that she will become a better artist by holding her to the fire and telling her what works and doesn't work. But when you put something perfect into the world, then it is what it is. Sorry.
I hope she's listening tonight on the web stream.
From your lips to Beyonce's ears. It was perfect. Sorry, it was.
So you've spoken about your experience at Exeter,
Mhm.
where you were one of few people of color.
48, we had, well, it was a different time, but there were 48 Black students out of 996. And there were probably, I don't know, 70 or 80 Asian students and very few Latino or Native American students, some South Asian students as well, but there weren't a lot of students of color. I think all in all, there might have been 200 students of color.
And Michelle Obama has, of course, also written about being at a, quote, extremely white and very male, end quote, Princeton University.
Mhm.
And so one question that was actually submitted from the audience is, how can students get a feel for campus culture outside of brochures?
Yeah. I actually don't know that you can. Universities lie. Those brochures are all fake. I actually, at this point in my life, I don't allow myself to be photographed for university brochures. When I was at Purdue, I was like, you a damn lie. How are you gonna put my face on there and pretend that you have Black professors? Stop. So the brochure is a lie. When you see like a bunch of Black people or like happy Asian kids sitting on the front of the thing, and then you walk around campus and you're like, where did they hide them? So you do have to go to campus, and you have to go to campus outside of tours and campus sanctioned events to really get a sense. And you have to talk to students who will be honest with you. You have to talk to current students, and not like the big man or the big woman on campus. You need to talk to like the nerd who sat at the goth table in high school and be like, all right, real talk, what's up? Because they're probably going to tell you what their experience is. And that's an individual thing, of course, and you're going to have a different experience. But if you talk to students who are actually on campus, you will start to hear more of the true story. I go to a lot of college campuses, and almost every college administrator who brings me somehow thinks that they need to like round up all the Black people for me to talk to. It's very funny. And so there's always this awkward moment, especially when you can tell they just picked like some poor Black kid walking down the hallway who has never heard of me, and why would he or she? And then they put them in the room with me, and I'm just like, I'm sorry that they did this to you, but you should know that I know what this is. And then I'm just like, tell me what's really going on. And I get the tea on every single campus. And then when I go on stage that night, I call them out on that so that the kids know somebody heard you. And I know this isn't going to change anything, but they're doing y'all wrong. And so I think it's important to talk to people and find out what the real deal is. And then you have to decide, how much nonsense am I willing to tolerate for 45 years?
Wow. So I've asked you about some of the things on my mind as a mother about our culture. What do you think are some of the biggest issues facing young people today?
Well, money. I mean, and in that most young people don't believe that they'll ever be able to buy a home, and they're not wrong. Most people are drowning in student loan debt that could easily be canceled because we didn't pay student loans for almost 3 years. And guess what? Literally nothing happened. And so long as we can send $40 billion more in weapons to Israel, I'm pretty sure we can absolutely afford to cancel student loans and provide free public education. So I think we have to talk about that. I think we have to look at war as a big I mean, war is a problem. We always know that. But like, why are we still fighting so many of these wars that are just creating swaths of destruction that I don't know that people will ever recover from? And I think young people are very hopeless because they look around at the world, they look at the United States, they look globally, and there's not a lot of space for hope. And so how do we encourage young people to feel hope and to feel like there's actually going to be a planet for them to inhabit that isn't war-torn and, of course, has breathable air? So also the environment. and the ongoing and soon to be increasing climate catastrophe. I sound a bit nuts, but these are actually real problems that we are contending with. It has rained nonstop all week. This is not, no, I mean, April showers bring May flowers, but all it does is rain. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that for the past few years. It's like Seattle everywhere. And we are bi-coastal, so we live in LA and New York. And LA is used to just never any rain, and there is water in the LA River. And I can't tell you what a creepy thing that is. We're used to the drought, and now it's like, oh, all it does is rain. That's a huge problem. It should not be raining this much in places that are not Seattle or Portland. And until we cut down on fossil fuel use, we're not going to see much change. So it's all very alarming.
So I see that we're out of time, but I can't help but end with one last question, which is, what is next for Roxane Gay?
Oh, same old, same old. I have a romance novel coming out next year that I'm writing with Channing Tatum. True story. And so that comes out Valentine's Week 2025. And I'm writing a few other books. And I teach at Rutgers.
Well, we can't wait to read them.
Thanks.
We have a few minutes for audience member questions. So, if anyone has a question on either side, we have 2 microphone stands. If anyone would like to ask a question, if not, we're gonna let them keep going. So, feel free if you have a question, go ahead. Elder Grassy in the front.
Yeah, you sure can.
Do you want my mic?
I don't want them.
What are they
Yeah,
gonna do to
I
me?
think you can emote. I can feel it.
Someone saying, Tyrant and Yaga slaps. Something to do with that. when it comes
I
to-
mean, the bass drop it's just genre. What is genre?
I agree with that. I think that. But one, I want to say thank you so much for the space and sharing space with us. As someone who practices connection and community as technology, you and bring you together, organize. There was something you said about the Democrats, and then something you said about the fuck around and find out. That brought me back to the Butler quote in the Powerful series, where the protagonist was thinking about that Mondo type group. And she said something along the lines of like, I don't know who will ever be them because we're not as vicious as they are, and as ugly as they are, right? And so there's this like tension between like wanting to like heal the world, kind, and yet recognizing that violence is present, and wanting to say, yo, fuck on and find out, right? Which lives in my bones as a self-harm person.
That's right. Damn.
Sounds of the energy. But yeah, it's just about like that tension, like recognizing that violence somewhere, equals violence anywhere, and also recognizing that people are kind of using a certain type of aggression to.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Basically, how do we handle being both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? Yes. And, you know, here's the thing. I don't think violence really solves anything. I think violence is a last resort, but I also know that revolution is never peaceful. It is never tidy. It's supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be raucous. And the reality is, yes, until we get as vicious as the Republicans, we are going to continue to eat shit politically in perpetuity. That's just a fact. We have to go subterranean when they go low. We cannot go higher because they don't care. You can only go higher with people who will recognize and respect that you are going higher. That is not these people. And I'm not talking about all Republicans. I'm sure somewhere, there are some conservative people who truly are just conservative and don't need to control everyone's lives. But the people that have the power brokering right now in the Republican Party, and especially now that Trump has taken over the RNC, these are very dangerous people. So this is a personal example, but they drove my cousin out of the presidency at Harvard with ruthless efficiency. And they did not stop until they got what they wanted. And now they're going after every other Black woman who's teaching at Harvard. And they did that because they could not stand to see a Black woman in a position of that much privilege. Don't cry for her, she is going to be okay. But it was still really fucking shitty. And so that's the kind of people that we're playing with. They don't care about handshakes and decorum and all of that. They care about winning at any cost. And so we can lose and carry our nobility with us, or we can fight back and maybe not be on the losing end of every single political fight. And so I just think we have come to a time when it is time to show them where we're from. Just saying. Hi.
I recently finished reading Opinions, and just a lot of the things are resonating with me and kind of connecting all these different things that you wrote. And you write a lot about your, I think, realism is your ministry, and you don't really, you know, and you sort of were talking about why you didn't really feel hopeful about a lot of things. So I guess, and then there's a, you know, you put all your pieces in about how no one is going to see us.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if maybe, what do you feel hopeful about? Is there anything you feel hopeful about?
No. You know, I struggle with hope, but I always have, which in my latest book, Opinions, I write about that quite a bit, about how hope is just not something. I think hope allows us to sort of defer responsibility for making change, because we're like, I hope it happens, but I don't, you know, that's not for me to deal with. But I do think that the kids are going to be okay. I do think that young people, they're really interesting. This little Gen Z and like the Gen Alpha, they're buck wild. And they're challenging in a really interesting way, but they really do care. And they really do have a sense of commitment to creating change. And I admire that. And so I am hopeful that things have not gotten so bad that young people have given up. Because if that happens, like, oof, we might be doomed. And I also think a lot of old people, like myself, have not given up either. I think we recognize that the fight is ongoing and that we have to create connections across all kinds of difference in order to really combat a lot of the really big and intractable problems that we're facing, whether it's trying to find peace in the Middle East or trying to put food on every American's table, and quite frankly, every person's table in the world. And actually, we can solve world hunger. We can solve world hunger for a number that's not even that high when you think about the fact that there are people strutting around with $250 billion in their pockets. Like, that's crazy. That is a problem. But we can deal with a lot of our problems by sort of just taking a holistic approach to addressing everything. We can't just focus on this and get to that later. We have done that historically, and a great many people have been left behind. And so I do have hope that we can come together and try and solve a lot of the world's problems. And I don't think that the solutions are going to be wholly satisfying. I don't think that they're going to come easily, but I do think that those solutions exist. And I do think we already know what we need to know to create the change that we need to see. We just have to be willing to commit to it. And a lot of us aren't. I mean, we like our lives, you know, we like our cars, and we, you know, that gas sure does get us good. I have an electric car and it sucks. It just does, because I have a non-Tesla. And so, you know, like, you have to go find a place to charge it, and Electrify America, that shit is always broken. They're raggedy. And then you're like, what, I'm supposed to just sit here in my car for 45 minutes while I charge? So like, yeah, we're gonna have to make some sacrifices for the happy future, but that's what I'm hopeful about. You're welcome. Hello. I don't think that mic is on. No, but why don't you just come closer and ask your question? Oh, there we go. The aliens are coming.
Do you want mine? Okay.
I'll repeat the question.
The industry that I'm in is, of course, systematically racist.
Mhm.
And you said something about being silent and kind of the only way to make the impact. And I've been silent for literally the past 10 years. So my question is, what would you advise for someone like me who has this, how to tell my story to make it impact?
Yes, I think my cousin works at your company. And she has been in the same position for 10 years for that very reason. No, I did not say silence is the only way to make an impact. I think that some people think right now that their silence is the most effective way to be heard. So she is working as a cosmetic chemist for a company that is notoriously racist. And she has been silent about it for 10 years, but like, what does she do now? How does she move forward and advocate for herself? Am I correct?
I've left the industry. Because
Oh, good. Like, peace out.
But I just felt I think there's a lot of Black women that is my deal.
Yes.
And I think that helps write my own book. But I've been silent for so long.
Yes. So how do you start to use your voice?
Yes.
You just start. You have to, I mean, write a blog post, write an essay and send it to some magazines. And actually people will be interested in your story because a lot of people don't know how messed up the cosmetics industry is. We know about the like animal testing level stuff, but people don't know about how they treat the people, and especially the Black women in this industry. And so I think telling your story does matter. I do think that it is a way to be heard, and it may not mean that you reach millions, but if you even reach one person, you have done something important and you have shared your story. And you never know who's going to hear what you have to say and then internalize it and in turn do something for themselves or for others. I'm always shocked by how far my words reach at times. People that I spoke to for 5 minutes, 15 years ago will come up to me and say, like, you changed my life. And I'm like, did I? And then they share how, and it's like, wow, I was just being myself. I didn't even know. And so you don't even know who you're reaching from one day to the next. And so keep that in mind as well, but just find a way to start telling your story and know that your story matters. A lot of times we're told our story doesn't matter, or that we're exaggerating, or that it wasn't that bad. No, it was that bad. You understood the situation perfectly. And so also don't diminish yourself or your memories to sort of make other people more comfortable. And recognize that not everyone is going to hear you or believe you or care, and that's okay. You don't need them. You're writing to the people who will believe you and who will care and who will be energized to join you in whatever you think you should be doing next. You're welcome.
I think that people, huge round of applause.
Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to welcome Margaret Mitchell, CEO of YWCA USA, to the podium. Thank you for being our work friend.
Oh, you're welcome. Listen, quit your job. Just quit it.
You, Roxane, Dr. Gay, you're an archaeologist. The way you go in and excavate in every essay, every blog, every opinion piece, the books, and what you come up with from every dig, it is always transformative.
Thank you.
Very, very powerful. And I got the invitation from Chief, and I was like, oh yes, I had to be there. And Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And also, I would love everyone in the room to thank Brigitte. Brigitte came to an event of mine and she was like, I've tried talking to your speaking agents and they gave me a crazy number. And do you think you would come to New Jersey? And I was like, well, I'm in New York half time. So yeah, I mean, it's just an hour and a half or like today, 2 hours. So just go tell them I told you I would do it. And then they sent me a stern email. Did you tell someone? And I was like, I sure did. But she was incredibly persistent, incredibly generous, incredibly kind. And so thank her.
The future is female and young leaders are leading now and she's certainly a part of that way. And I love the remarks of this young woman, you are using your voice now and it's that it will not stop. And Dr. Tara, I just wanted to thank you for narrating, facilitating, and look forward to diving into your work and thank everybody for coming. I think, one of the most important things about the YWCA is this long, deep history in which we've sometimes been on the forefront and sometimes at the back of the line, hiding around our mission, but we're always ever advancing that. And so when you talk, Dr. Gay, about feminism being in flux, it really is. And this is a time in which everyone in this room, your voices are needed, your activation is needed now. We must have our foot on the accelerator. We are about 150 years away from gender equity. And we are about 200 years away from living through racial equity. And yet my mother is 93 years old. I just had a granddaughter born, and I believe that granddaughter, that her children will see and enjoy. But what we have to do right now is keep our foot on the gas pedal. And it's just incredibly important that we not only feel it, that we not only nod our heads, but that we activate in a way that really drives change. So thank you, Rose, for having me. It was really wonderful. And again, thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, one more time, come on. Thank you all very much for coming to YWCA Stand Against Racism this year. The part of the story that Roxane left out was that I told her I'm gonna cry and call my mom. So, Mom, when you get a crying protocol tonight, she's on the way. So, thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Great job. That
Thank
was
you.
really wonderful.
Thank you. We got in a lot of the questions. Great.
All right.
Oh, I'm not sitting here. Am I sitting there?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Right. Thank you all.
I can't believe I forgot my books for you to sign. I know, I just did an event with Kate and Ann, and I forgot her books as well.